This is John here. I'm speaking with Dennis today. Dennis has a interesting question he wants to talk about today, and I'm gonna pass it to Dennis, and we'll just kind of ask me the question, and then we can kind of go with it.
Yeah, so lately I've been noticing, there's like a shift in work within the market, right? In particular, a friend came to me during the last weekend and he was talking about going into trade. He himself is a, you can say he's an office worker, kind of has a cubicle of some sort into design work and all that kind of structure. But he brought up to me like the aspect of going into trade due to the potential opportunities that he can get it financially and the availability of work and things like that. So it got me thinking, like has there been a huge change in the market, where we're lacking in that field? And I know that John himself has experience in both fields, but for those who don't know, John, would you be able to explain like what is kind of considered like a trade, or like maybe even your definition of an office worker?
Yeah, for sure. Let me kind of break down what I know. It might not be 100% accurate to like a Google definition, but to my understanding, a trade is pretty much typically someone would go into an apprenticeship and maybe work under someone, and through those working hours, through those experience, you would develop a trade. So I'll give you an example. I study culinary. I actually went to school for it, but you don't actually need to go to school. You can study it under a chef or a pastry chef, depending what you want to do. That is pretty much in essence a trade. And just to give a few more examples, like a plumber, maybe a contractor, landscaper, anything I believe physical labor using, your physical skills, using your hands, I believe that's what a trade is defined as.
Mm.
Versus, Dennis and I went to school for business. We studied finance. Dennis has a background in finance and accounting. I have a background in finance and HR. And pretty much what we are doing, as a full-time job right now is in a corporate office environment. So I would say we don't use our physical labor in exchange for, compensation. We maybe would use technical experience, depending on the type of work we do, and work in an office environment, and maybe that's a little bit more of what's defined as a corporate office worker. What are your thoughts on those definitions, Dennis?
I strongly agree. Like at the end of the day, it's kind of where people kind of differentiate those two. I wouldn't say just fields, just areas of work, right? Like you can say an office worker is a little bit more white collared, right? You're shooting up. You're kind of in an environment where others are trying to present themselves in a way that they're professional looking like, and then doing work that is a little bit more how you say organized and a little bit less hands-on, as John said, right? Versus the trade, you can a lot of people recognize as more blue collar work. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of hard labor. Risk when I mean that, very, it's very it's physical. There's a risk of injury that happens all the time. You're actually facing more of a client. Your customers face to face. You're having how I see like two pressures, right? Customer as well as your superiors versus in an office worker, that pressure from a client or customer is more like trickling down, right? The more serious it gets, the higher it goes into your direct reports, your seniors, and afterward it comes back to you, and you get like a domino effect, right? That's how I kind of view it, and with the trade off of having trade work and office work, it kind of depends really on education as well, right? Like in the modern or current society, when you see an office worker, most likely they're having like a degree or some sort of diploma, versus where John said, like as a trade, you may just work under somebody, get a lot of experience, and then maybe there's a certificate or some license, and then you're off to the races, right? Um, and John, with your experience in those kind of two worlds, have you kind of experienced on like a little bit more on what people thought you be doing, and has that kind of influenced your change from being in the culinary world to like the business? Because I'm bringing this up as because like my friend, as I kind of earlier mentioned, one of his fears in the past was that he's going from a office worker to a trade. There's a lot of different people, stereotypes or prejudices against that, and that's kind of one of his main concerns in transitioning. Have you kind of experienced anything like that?
Yeah, you know what? I want to actually go back to a point that you mentioned, and it triggered something. And
Oh, okay.
I quickly Googled it. Being in a trade, yes, you can, make by without taking formal education, but there are certifications out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's across the board. There's Red Seal, Blue Seal. If you are thinking of going into a trade, that's something you might want to look into. I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember the ins and outs about it, but there are like a certain amount of hours you need to work in a certain trade, and you have to write a certain test to get these seals. And to have this, red seal, it's a prestige you know, kind of certification or whatever you want to call it that qualifies you to become a, trade professional in your field. I'm not sure if you heard of that, but that what you mentioned earlier, that triggered exactly what, if maybe I stayed in culinary, which is
Mm-hmm.
like cooking, being a chef, I might pursue that red seal. But yeah, that triggered my head. But can you repeat your question? I totally just that popped up and I forgot what I was gonna say.
No worries, no worries. Like this I don't want to label it as a podcast, or it's kind of more like a conversation that we're sharing amongst multiple listeners. But yeah, something as in our kind of structure wise, we'll go back and forth. We'll try to target those kind of different areas. But again, like I've heard of our certifications and licenses, right? I think there's to a certain degree, there's so many levels, right? Like going back to my friend who recently, wants to go in the trade. He wants to be a gas technician now, right? There's about three different levels, and then there's three different costs. There's so many things to consider. Even like something as you maybe have to give up a full-time job in order to pursue this. There may be alternating work between studying and doing some hands-on apprenticeship and shadowing of that sort. But like I think depending on the trade you are, there's so many areas to achieve it. Like going back to what John said, if he's in culinary, there's those certificates and licenses, and then you may also hear stories where great chefs to today started as low as a dishwasher, right? Those kind of different areas of increasing and then trying to make it out there. But I think in both me and John's world, we're kind of lean towards education first, and then afterwards from there, you kind of pick up experience, and then you kind of grow from there and disperse where you want to go next, right? But going back again, John, like the prejudice point, I think there might be a lot of listeners who may be in the same situation. Has that influenced you in any way from switching from culinary to more business focus field?
Yeah, you know what? When you bring up the point education, that
Yeah.
is something that 100% I feel that if I didn't go through the, university system here, I would have had a difficult time finding a corporate level job versus, if I stayed in culinary, I think even if I didn't go to culinary school, I would have become able to excel in that trade. And full disclosure, to give some context, I do not know the friend who Dennis is referring to. We just have a topic at hand, and just kind of speaking from experience, being slightly on both sides, kind of seeing, you know, what goes on both sides of the blue collar and white collar, workforce. I would say, for Dennis's friend, really think about why they want to transition over to this field, because I feel that, you know, at a younger age, Dennis and I are pretty close in age. We're in our, late 20s. I'm probably a little bit older than Dennis, but going from a white collar job, office environment to a trade is going to be much easier than going from a trade back into the corporate world. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about your friend, just so we can, build some more context, build more story around, you know, why someone would transition over. But for my point of view, my understanding is, you know, we really need to figure out, what's the kind of motive for changing directions like that. Because, once you go one direction, like I said, it might be very hard for someone in a trade to go back into the corporate life, if you get what I mean, Dennis, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
why don't I ask you kind of one question? Could you share a little bit more context why your friend is looking to make that transition?
Off the top of my head, I can recall like the main pillars. Of course, one would be financial reasons, right? I think in his area of work, which is like design work, UX, as you know, to be specific, it's very saturated. He's kind of working in different like teams and stuff like that, and his vision is not getting across, right? So he kind of feels, you know, underappreciated, right? So he's in a work where he's kind of feeling unhappy. He feels the most happy when creating for himself. So that's actually sorry. That's actually the second point. But yeah, first point of course is the financial, right? Like if you go in trades right now, the jobs are so readily available. They're they're paying really good prices and oh sorry, not prices. It'd be rates. And to the point where he feels that whenever he's done work, he can just be done with it. Like there's nothing that he needs to worry about after business hours. Nothing like he needs to think of inspirations on this next project or this next design. So those are the two things, and the lastly, like I think he just feels that he's coming clean from people's expectation of himself, meaning he was so worried before of going into trade because he gets judged by family members and friends because like instead of oh he's working in office, he's like oh now he's becoming blue collared, he has to get his hands dirty and things like that, so he won't be as well respected. So those are kind of like the three main points that kind of got away from him, and I think it's very true in the last piece. Like a lot of people prevent themselves from going into trade is what other people think of them, right? And then you're losing the comfort of being in a office space that will not get your hand dirty, and times of uh, summer or winter you don't get that kind of comfort, right? You'll have to go through different kind of weather conditions in order to get that done. But yeah, those are the things that he shared with me.
Okay. This is just speaking from experience and personal opinions. So, if I offend anyone, I don't mean to, but, these are just my point of view. So let's start with point number one. You mentioned finances,
Mm-hmm.
getting a better rate, better salary. Um, from what I see, and even from my HR background, you're right. Being in a trade actually could yield a higher compensation when you look at it kind of dollar value. It really depends on what type of trade, first of all, you're going into. You mentioned your friend is looking to get into becoming a gas technician. That sounds a little bit dangerous because, when you work in a trade, there's obviously a certain level of danger to every trade. There's many different trades, but how companies pay for these type of workers is based on health and safety. So when a job is dangerous, typically those will yield higher salary or hourly wage. Depends on the industry. So, depending if you're working for a independent contractor or a, corporate company, you might be either given a salary or an hourly wage, and depending on how big that organization is, right? The great thing about working in a trade, sometimes your hours are not capped. What that means is, if you're in an office, typically most of the time your employer will only let you work 40 hours per week. Even if you have the energy and the will and the passion to work 80 hours per week, most likely your employer will still pay you 40 hours per week unless some sort of overtime, commitment was approved or, negotiated in your offer. I know I'm getting really into HR terms. Dennis is just nodding at me, but I think it's important. So if your friend is looking to make more money, I think that's the first thing that checks off. Yes, he can make more money. Number two, you know, mentioned kind of being his own boss. When you're working in a trade, um, I agree. There's some jobs that not everyone wants to do. So I think it's very easy. Maybe not easy. Easy is the wrong word, but a good opportunity, you can carve an opportunity out for yourself to start your own, whether it's a small business or, partner with a client to create some sort of, service in that specific field. So I want to check that box off too. And number three, it's kind of a personal thing. He has gone past the judgment. So really, it sounds like there's nothing to lose for him. And it's a him, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's
I
him.
know we contexting female can be a gas technician too. Make sure I emphasize that. So I really feel like these 3 points have checked out. But my only point of view is, you know, has this individual experience getting their hands dirty, dirty work? Because this could become, very dirty. You're using your hands, you can get cuts, you can get scratches, you can get scraped. Has this individual maybe taken a weekend to try something out? Like, that's why apprenticeships exist. You can do an apprenticeship and realize that, hey, I don't really want to do this. Then, you might have to pivot again. Um, just kind of toss it back to you. Everything does sound like it's lining up for this individual, but, from someone who, you know, done some, chef work, your hands get dirty, you're standing like 30 hours a day, they're not even 30 hours in a day. It's hard work. Would this still fit your friend if we talk to your friend and tell them it's dirty work too, right?
Yeah. To all our listeners, I do apologize. We are having a little bit of a technical issue with the connection wise. So you may have heard John like a little choppy. But just to kind of sum up his questions would be, has my friend kind of encountered any kind of hands on, right? But before we answer that, I kind of want to rewind a little bit point about the hours and stuff like that. Just for clarity's sake, and maybe I'm also putting my little bit of personal experience in. Although you're an office worker, you work a lot of hours. There's still not going to be a chance for overtime. I'm just going to be very clear. It's not the correct or right HR practices, right? But however, you may be spending a lot of hours, and your salary wouldn't be make it. So I just want to put it out there for those listening. Extra hours and extra effort, even with your energy, does not yield high return. It really depends on your organization that hired you and what their beliefs are in maintaining a work-life balance. But going back to John's point, he is he does have experience being hands-on. From what he's told me that in the past he's worked with his father who was a contractor, so he would kind of follow on some kind of small trips to work with them and help out here and there. So hands dirty wise, I don't think that it's a issue with him at all, and he's. I flag these things to him too. He's very aware of the risks and what happens. He's also a person that's kind of afraid of insects. So if you're a gas technician, there's chances are that you're going to be in small spaces filled with bugs, basements or a factor, garages, all those kind of things. So he's very aware. But I think another risk that he's kind of taking is that in order for him to kind of complete this transition, he needs to let go of his current full time job. So it means that he won't have income coming in. He'll be actually spending significant amount, maybe about $4,000 for like I believe it's a 17 or 19-week course. So alternating 1 week of full study, another week would be going out the fields. I think partnered with the experienced technician or within a group, and looking at what they're doing and getting that experience. But he's very hesitant on that piece, because again, going from something, from office work to trade. And although he has some hands-on experience with his father and doing kind of getting his hands dirty, quote unquote, gas is completely different, right? He's only hearing this kind of good things from his best friend who's already in the field for a few years, who kind of actually done this similar transition. So he's kind of banking on those experiences and hoping for the same for himself. Yeah.
Okay. I want to bring up a point because I'm not 100% sure. And, you know, don't, can't this individual, your friend, do some sort of work while going into school? I don't think it's a full on hands on. And sometimes these apprenticeships and kind of working, learning on the job, you do get compensated. It's not that income fully stops. So, just like I said, I don't know this friend. I want to be helpful. Just
Mm-hmm.
kind of putting some context. It sounds like the thing that's stopping this individual is money, right? Like there's going to be a period that this person will stop maybe making steady income.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to say a point that while this person's in this program and these opportunities, you know, I believe are plentiful. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into this field. There should be some compensation opportunities, through his learning. So, I'm not trying to make it difficult, but I feel like, you know, he's stopping himself from doing something that he mentioned that, hey, this might be a good idea, but then, putting in, I want to say, excuse that
Mm-hmm.
maybe is not 100% accurate unless he done his research, he done his due diligence and know that you can't work in this field unless you got some sort of certificate or, that. I don't know if he told you or like that, but that's kind of my point of view. It sounds like what's hindering is something that might not be true.
Yeah, maybe he hasn't shared the complete view on that. I didn't really ask if the co-op paid anything of that sort, but I think he has a lot more to think about, more personal life than it is more career wise, and he's also kind of shifting more career to be, his main focus, right? But in the end of the day, like it's true, like there could be this. I think fear plays a lot in there, right? Like you're going to something that's completely different, out of your element, and a chance that, like again, I say chance, right? It's not like a guarantee that he'll be happy, right? I think that's the biggest risk, because in the end of the day, no matter what pays you, if you don't wake up wanting to go to work, then it's all for nothing, right? You can be Money can only give you certain happiness, because that's you're trying to buy back your freedom, but that's things that I kind of flagged to him, like what's the most important to him. And I really chimed in, like I really emphasize on happiness. But yeah, those are kind of those these are the things that he's kind of considering, and I haven't heard from him since. So what he decided, but I hope he chose the best. And like having this overall topic is just so interesting, right? Like, if I were to just break away from go on the friend part, right? It's kind of makes me think about the current market, right? And it got me thinking about things like when you're younger. I don't know, John, if you ever have thought about this, right? Our parents had the expectations to go to higher education, get a little bit of office work because you don't want to go through those kind of same manual labor kind of intensities, right? But because everybody's doing the same to their kids and telling them always go to school, there's a saturation of the market, right? It's getting harder to find jobs. The pay maybe not as great, right? You get the comfort and luxury, sure, but you're not reaping the rewards after going through 4 years of schooling and such, right? So that creates kind of like that market for trades, right? Because I will assume back in the day as well, that market would be like more trade heavy work than kind of like office work heavy, right? So then now I think in the last maybe even 10, 15 years, that shift has happened in the market. Like there may be a time in the future, maybe when John, you and I have kids, you're like, school, it's more up to you now. Like if you feel like you want to be, the more trade, like the plumbing, you want to be a little bit more hands-on and things like that, you may want to lead towards that instead of having that pressure in the back in like we have, as in go to school, get an office job, work 9 to 5, and you're good and ready and set, right? So those are kind of the things that were hit me the most when I was talking to my friend. It's kind of like, huh, you see the change there. And also, just to add another note, a separate friend, and yes, guys, I have a lot of friends, so I'm not gonna put names out and whatnot. But I have another friend who he went through college and then afterwards as a engineer, and then he wanted to do plumbing, right? There was an opportunity. He had to pay I think a few courses, like a total of 10K, and then they guarantee that they'll hire him and give him all these kind of benefits and things like that. And it worked out for him, right? He started working, but he started didn't like the boss, right? Because small business and things like that. And he was looking for me on help on how to find another job, right? So I gave him the same spiel, resume, and things like that, but it felt like his effort in finding a job was so much more simple to me. He just sent something on Indeed. He got a call back, and within like a week, right? They scheduled him a call, which is like the following week, and he basically got the job on the spot, right? Like the transition was just so simple and easy, and I guess because the job was so available, the demand was there, and then he got it, right? So it kind of gives you figures like, was it worth it to go through that mental torture of university? Like, no, everybody's experience for post secondary is different, right? But personally, I went through some different things during that period. So was it worth it, right? Just because I have like an office job now, like I'm not really that set on happiness and wealth, right? But it feels like my friend who was only within a few years in industry is pretty much matching my salary. So it kind of gives you that perspective, right? Like John, like, I don't know if you kind of ever thought of that, like the whole demand and supply of the job in these fields and things like that, and maybe you have other friends that kind of exposed to that kind of same culture. Anything to add?
Yeah, you know what? I do a bit of recruitment, and there are certain segments, certain industries that there is a challenge recruiting for. So it really looks at that supply and demand in the job market. I don't know. It For me, I don't think I want to go back into the trades. What about you, Dennis? With their like kind of in your own words, would you say that you're willing to venture into the trades?
It's kind of hard for me to say, right? Because I think the the jobs I've held, in my younger days, right? Would be one. I was a do you call them line cooks or fry cooks at McDonald's? Right? That was an experience on its own. Right? I was in high school. It was just a quick, easy job. It was labor intensive for sure. I was very young, and I was very eager to make money. I worked at those ungodly hours at like maybe 4 a.m. and whatnot, and you hear different people yelling at you over the comms and those kind of experiences. It was hot in the summer. I had to be in front of a grill. I was pressured on cooking as fast as I could. While there's one cashier in the front, I was the only one in the back. And then the other experience is like I was, selling cell phones, right, in the retail space. A lot cleaner. still a little bit labor intensive, meaning, I had to be on my feet all day. I had to listen to the pressures of customers and trying to make them happy, and then in return also make my boss happy. But you know, there are times where I'm like, I'm always sitting down. It's like, maybe it'd be nice for some physical activity, right? But then at the same time, I can message just my friend. It was like, damn, I cut my finger today again, super deep. It's bleeding. I go to hospital, and I'm like, do I want to risk my finger? Like those kind of things. Like besides, maybe the fact that my laptop may be damaged and I can't work. At least I still have my fingers. Right? Those are the things that kind of come across my mind when I think of trade. It's like, would I want to do it? There are times like I guess like if I were to do it, carpentry it's cool, right? It's like you can build things from your own hands, basically from nothing. You create, furniture. What is there? Maybe some art stuff if you fiddle or things like that. And the result would be great, and I think that to me would be a little bit more rewarding than an office job. However, I think the process, I don't think I have the patience, right? I'm so used to having things automated and things flowing in, and typing. My fingers itself, I feel are in better control than the rest of my body, right? So it's kind of those different elements makes me not want to go back, or makes you don't want to switch to trade. But sometimes you look at the figure, it's kind of tempting, but then the long term me, it's kind of like I don't see myself doing it.
Yeah. But I have a serious question for you, Dennis.
Yeah, for sure.
I never knew you worked at McDonald's. Can you tell us a secret?
Oh
Have you
yeah.
ever just took a chicken nugget and just ate it?
Honestly, if it's been so long, so I don't really. It's actually 10 years. It's actually, I think I started in August too. So this is hilarious. This is probably 10 years. But yes, when I was working at those kind of night shifts where I start at 11 p.m. and ended at 7 a.m. I remember taking a chicken, um, a cutlet of some sort. With the ones that I put in those kind of big chicken, not the McChicken, but the crispy chicken, those ones. And I just took a bite in front of it. Like I think I was so wild. It was the camera was right there staring at me, and I didn't care. I just took a huge chomp. But
Yeah.
some secrets, McDonald's. I think the biggest one that shocks everybody, even to this day, is that when you order a fish fillet sandwich, you will never get a full slice of cheese. It's always
Why?
halved. I don't know. It's how they serve the sandwich, right? It's almost like the fish fillet has two qualities that are unique to it. One, they steam the bun, and second, it's always half a slice of cheese. Yeah, those are the I think my quote unquote trade secrets. Yeah.
Nice.
But it's very interesting, like on those late hours, you're by yourself, you have the headset on you. Most likely, everybody's drunk, so you get a lot of experiences listening to those kind of orders over the intercom and things like that. But I think it's part of my legacy. If I were to share, I don't regret one bit of of working at McDonald's.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how we are on time, but I know we kind of talked a lot today, and obviously just us talking, and kind of I just took schooling in kind of both trade and office environment work. Would you say we answer some of the things you might want to tell your friend? Were there some takeaways that want to just recap before we end this conversation?
Mm. To be frank, and because this conversation is as casual as possible, he's not aware that I'm kind of sharing this, and it may be leading too much into. If he were to listen, he might know it's exactly him. But I think a lot of the takeaway we talked about today, it's not has not been unaddressed on his end. And Yeah, I think that's about it. I'd love to share what the his decision is with you guys in like the next conversation or podcast. But ultimately, if I were him, I probably would go to do a trade.
Nice, nice. Okay, you know what? That's a good topic today. If you kind of like what we talked about, um, let us know we should talk more about this type of stuff, or we have other topics lined up to talk about on our next conversation and podcast.
Yeah,
Sounds good, Dennis?
sounds great to me. All right, have a have a great night, day, afternoon, wherever you're listening from, in whichever time zone. Bye now.